Okay. How is it going, everybody out there in internet world? I hope you're all doing fine, whether you're tuning in live or watching this later on the replay. This is Nick. I'm here again. I'm doing another live stream. I was going to broadcast on Friday, but I got the show ready. I got it all in place. I went through the articles and I woke up super early this morning. I thought, you know what, let's just get it done, get it out there. Maybe I'll do another one on Friday. It's funny when you start putting these things together, when you start trolling the internet for newsworthy content to comment on, to help understand the big picture of what's going on in the world. There's a lot to talk about. It never stops coming. It's like a relentless torrent of information, and it's hard to keep up with it all. But we do our best, and that's why we are here. So today I've got a show for you, which is called, well, this is episode 3. It's Common Censored. Part of my efforts and what I want to do in speaking out is to highlight the effort that is underway to kind of prevent us all from understanding what's going on in the world, prevent us all from having a coherent picture that we all share, that we can all agree on. Right? It's divide and conquer. And the main way that this is done these days is through the internet. It's siloing us all off, putting us all in our little echo chambers and in our little bubbles where we're just continuously fed things that either we already agree with or we are completely in disagreement with in order to trigger a kind of outrage response. And it's kind of the dualistic or way of dealing with people. They give you two options, and it's black or white or red or blue, as usually is the case. And you've got to be in one of those two groups. And if you're in one group, you have to hate the people in the other group. And if, like me and like some other people, if you manage to get out of that trap and you stand back and you look at both groups and you say, do you know what? I agree with both groups. In fact, what I agree with them about is their criticisms of the other group. Okay, so I agree with the blue team in all the things they say that are wrong with the red team. And I agree with the red team in all the things that they say are wrong with the blue team. If that makes sense. So that's kind of where we're trying to stand back. We're trying to look at the big picture. We're not trying to get involved in the artificial divide and conquer nonsense that so many of us fall into. And, it's not your fault. We're hardwired to be tribal. We're hardwired to take sides and join teams and find people who agree with us. But I managed to put a show together today. We've got a lot of articles to get through, things to look at, things to consider. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to be here for the next sort of hour-ish. It's going to be a bit shorter than my last one. I'm not doing a full reading of an article. I've got a cool resource to give you at the end. So please stick around for that. It's all going to make sense and it's going to come full circle. And I'm very happy to have you here on this journey with me. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first article is The Daily Skeptic. So The Daily Skeptic was born in 2020. And it was originally called Lockdown Skeptics. But they've since rebranded because lockdowns don't seem to be a thing anymore. Who knows if they'll be brought back at some point. It's that dark patch in recent history that nobody wants to talk about anymore, and we just pretend it didn't happen and get on with our lives and pretend it could never happen again. But they've rebranded themselves and they're now called The Daily Skeptic, and they have this tagline: question everything, stay sane, live free. One thing I really like about this website is they put up a daily news roundup where they kind of aggregate lots of stories, and it's a good place to go to just get a good sense of headlines. More recently, they're heavily pushing The Current Thing. But since The Current Thing kicked off, it's not been as good. But it's still a good place to go to get a kind of overview of things that are threatening free speech and issues that are unfolding, which kind of affect us all, but don't make it into onto everybody's radar, let's say. So this is an article from the 16th of November, 2023. It's called Billionaire Funds The Guardian to Tune of $116 per reader of print edition. And this is the billionaire in question. Check him out. Doesn't he look philanthropic, good-natured, full of love and kindness and decency? So it says, in 2021, The Guardian ran a series of adverts claiming the newspaper was not funded by billionaires, and our readers' backing gives us the independence to hold the powerful to account. Okay, so this is 2021. This is not too long ago. This was about 2 years ago, and we're going to find out that claim, that advertising campaign, which you can see a snapshot of right there, was a load of BS. So The Guardian is backed by a number of billionaire philanthropic foundations, including the European Climate Fund and the Rockefeller Family Fund. According to the investigative journalist Ben Pyle, an additional $12 million grant from the Gates Foundation is equivalent on its own to $116 for every reader of the print version. So for every person who buys a physical copy of this newspaper, which is probably not actually that many, because I don't suppose too many people get the physical copies of papers and anymore, but they're getting paid $116 by just from the Gates Foundation. That's not including the Rockefeller Family Fund, which is an absolutely huge pot of money, which has been shaping all manner of industries and institutions for over 100 years now. Very much worth learning about the Rockefeller Family Fund if you don't know anything about them. And European Climate Fund, well, they couldn't possibly have any kind of agenda, could they? So this is a sensational and wide-ranging report that Pyle has given us, and it lifts the lid on the extraordinary influence a few wealthy individuals have recently gained in directing public policy across many political issues, including medicine, climate, and net zero. So the funding mainstream media plays a large part in driving public policy. So if you think about it, what newspapers do is they shape people's view on things. They get people to think a certain way, to have certain beliefs, and to be less questioning about agendas that might be in the works. So it's really a tool of social engineering, of social shaping, of it's a weapon in the war for hearts and minds, let's say. So you got to know where the money comes from. You got to know who's really keeping these things going, because the people who pay for these things to exist are the people who get to say what is and is not talked about and allowed to be discussed on the platform or in the publication, etc. So The Guardian is not the only mainstream media outlet in the UK to benefit from cash injections from Bill Gates. The BBC collects a handsome $58 million, and sizable gifts have been pocketed by the Daily Telegraph and the Financial Times. So you live in a situation where you've got all these options. You can read The Guardian, you can read the Daily Telegraph, you can watch the BBC, you can read the Financial Times, but it turns out the same person's funding all of them, which means they're all going to be pushing the same sort of narrative and the same sort of agenda. Right? This is why it's so important to get out of the mainstream media bubble, which is, it's called the mainstream. It's just a stream because it's shallow, and to get into independent viewpoints and not crowdfunded, but audience funded, listener and viewer funded efforts to analyze and disseminate news and information. So we've got a handy little table here which is telling us the different media organizations and the total grants they've received, coming in at a cool 82.7 million. So that's quite a bit of money. You get influence with that money, right? If somebody came to you and gave you that amount of money, it's pretty unlikely they're going to say there's no strings attached, although that is the kind of message they'd like us to believe. Climate-related grants between 2013 and 2021 by principal and strategic foundations are estimated to total $2.7 billion. And this is what is driving things like anti-car policies and air pollution panics. So if you live in the UK, as I do, you'll be aware that in certain places now, London and Bristol, they've rolled out a extra charge for people who drive old cars. And people whose cars do not meet the European regulations for air quality and emission standards. Interesting, because I thought we'd left the EU, but that's another topic entirely. But who drives old cars? Well, it's poor people who can't afford to buy new cars. So it's a tax on the poor people. It's a tax on people who are working and the cost of living is going up, and at the same time they're hammering you for driving an old car and not being able to afford a new one. It's sick. It's very deranged. But the funding that goes into these newspapers and these efforts is what makes that palatable, and it is what causes people to kind of roll over and accept that. Although there has been some pushback, but I couldn't possibly endorse or say anything positive about that pushback because people have been getting arrested for doing that. Lawrence Fox. So a few philanthropists now have extraordinary influence in global agencies such as the United Nations and the World Health Organization. They exclude the wider society and promote and often implement policies that have no grassroots support. Yeah, so it's top down. You know, WHO, UN, all these foundations and think tanks, they're enforcing a top-down agenda upon us, upon the average Jane and Joes of the public. And this is well documented, and because they've been writing books about it for over 100 years, and you can trace it right back to pre-World War I, in fact. Which is, you know, part of what my efforts are here on this channel is to talk about those books and review them and bring them to you if you're not aware of that. So in London, Mayor Sadiq Khan chairs the C40 group of world mayors, backed by billionaires such as Michael Bloomberg and Extinction Rebellion funder Sir Christopher Hun. The group promotes a variety of lifestyle changes surrounding restriction of diet, travel, and many other personal freedoms. So billionaires, they just love you. They want the best for you. They want to help you have a good life full of meaning and satisfaction. No, that's nonsense. And they fund the people they need to fund, get them into positions of influence and power so that they can, in turn, pay the favor back to benefit the billionaires. I mean, this is, and I don't blame all billionaires. Some people get there through hard work and graft and really making a difference and adding to people's lives and providing value. But the majority of them, less likely that's how they got there. So this is what they're doing. They're promoting a variety of lifestyle changes surrounding the restriction of diet, travel, and many other personal freedoms. Yes, they want to get rid of meat, which is one of the healthiest things you could possibly eat. They want to get rid of your ability to move around. So this is the 15-minute cities thing that's going on in the UK and trialed in Oxford. They want to get rid of your cars. They want you driving electric cars that can't go as far as reliably and can be shut down remotely because they're electric. They're going to be connected to the Internet of Things. And so, you know, you say the wrong thing while you're driving along in your car, they're going to press a button and it's going to just come to a halt and you're going to be walking. The public has been excluded from politics, he continues. Yes, I mean, it's hard to believe that the people who are involved in this game represent us, care about us, and are not doing anything other than benefiting themselves. Experts that depart from the policy agenda are routinely excluded from the public debate by research agendas, editorial policy, and cancel culture. This deprives the public of debate about costs and trade-offs of far-reaching policies. Yeah, and we're going to see later in this show experts this very thing happening. It's real. It's going on, and there's an enforced consensus. And if you disagree with it, boom, you're out. Get lost. You're gone. You're cancelled. You're deplatformed, and you lost your job. Unfortunately. So the next article we want to look at is from the National Association of Scholars. This is Curtailing the Censorship Industrial Complex by Dave Randall. This is a little bit older. It was out on August the 1st, but it leads really well into the next story that I want to focus on. But for this one, we've got a picture of the CCTV camera there. And, you know, for people who don't know, the UK is the most surveilled nation in the world in terms of CCTV. You're on camera all the time if you're outdoors, and increasingly so if you're indoors, because we're all sitting in front of laptops and we've got smartphones, and every single one of these devices has a camera pointed at your face. So yeah, it's Big Brother type stuff. But what does Dave Randall have to say? So he's telling us about Michael Schellenberger, who recently testified about the censorship industrial complex, which is CIC, before the American Congress. Schellenberger described an interlocking network of government agents, social media companies, and university professors who work together to identify disinformation or misinformation and encourage such disinformation to be removed from the internet and indeed removed from all sites of public discussion. So one thing to notice about these terms disinformation and misinformation is what they do not say is false information or wrong information or incorrect information or factually inaccurate information or contradictory information, right? Why don't they use those terms? Because it would be good to have people in there ironing out the contradictions in the world, in people's worldview, as I've talked about before. It would be good to have incorrect, non-factual information that is wrong, that is inaccurate. It would be good to get rid of that, or at least highlight it and flag it as such. But that's not what they're interested in. They're not interested in helping you have a non-contradictory worldview, which is based on evidence and facts and reasons, and reasonable interpretation of that evidence and facts. That's not what they want. They want to get rid of misinformation and disinformation. So the question is then has to be asked: who's labeling and defining what misinformation and disinformation is? And they want to get rid of it from all public discussion. So somebody out there is going to be given the job of determining what is mis and disinformation. And if you fall foul of that, you're going to get removed from the public discussion. Excuse me. So certainly Schellenberger has identified a true and important phenomenon. For a great many academics proudly identify themselves as working on disinformation. So it's becoming a more important field that people are moving into. Mariana Spring for the BBC has recently announced herself as the BBC's disinformation expert. And actually there's a bunch of articles debunking her disinformation efforts, which are incredibly good. I should talk about on a future show, but let's continue with this for now. A skeptic might put it that American censors seek to expand their reach worldwide. Now then, remember the article we started with. So you've got American foundations, the Rockefeller Foundation. You got Bill Gates. He is funding publications here in England, which suggests a worldwide reach from America to England. And that funding, we know, curtails what can and cannot be said in those publications. So, I don't think you have to be skeptical. You just have to have your eyes open and be paying attention to see that this is what is happening. All academia for some generations has been increasingly reluctant to allow the expression of non-progressive points of view. So this is funneling people into what is and is not acceptable to talk about and say, and this is happening more and more and more. For example, climate skepticism was early calumniated as climate denialism. What a word. You're denying the climate. You'd have to be a deluded moron to deny the climate. You live in it, right? So the word denialism, of course, presumes the truth of the theory of man-made catastrophic climate change and unpleasantly harkens back to the concept of denying Christ, the occasion for 2,000 years of casual Jew beatings and more serious pogroms. So denialism, yeah, as you can see, it's an old trick. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. Are you denying the climate exists? Are you denying the climate changes? No, climate changes, obviously. It always changes. Everything changes. The one constant, everything changes except the fact that everything changes, But calling you a denier of something is a way to, like it says, that label has the implication baked into it that the thing that you're denying is true. And it goes back a long time, and it's very similar to the phobic. Let's say you're something phobic. You might not be, because arachnophobia is a fear of spiders. But they tag phobic onto things to say you're meaning, which means you're fearful of something, when in fact you might just disagree with it. You might just think it's silly or nonsensical, or you might think it's harmful and you might be just against it. But they'll call you a phobic to imply that you're sort of insecure and scared and threatened, and that is not what you are expressing. Right. The presumption that one thesis is true and attendant desire to censor opposing evidence and arguments has spread to virtually every area of academia. Censorialism and censorship has been most blatant in the last decade upon a range of especially politicized topics, including Biden-related current events, especially his son's laptop, China, climate change, which used to be global warming, acid rain, remember that? Hole in the ozone, remember that? They don't happen anymore. They're gone. Climate change. The marketing campaign for climate change is the thing that keeps changing. Check it out. Look back. The Earth was freezing. It was cooling. Global cooling. We're gonna have a mini ice age. Now it's boiling. We got a global. Is it global boiling? The new one they used. CV-19 and the public health policy, environmental policy, Israeli history and current events, race, sex, sexual orientation, the Russia-Ukraine war, and Trump-related current events. All these things have become politicized, meaning that you're in either the red team or the blue team. And if you're in the red team or the blue team, you must hate and despise the opposing team. And that's how it works. You got to be either for or against it. You can't just step back and say, well, there's good things about it, there's bad things about it. You can't step back and say, well, it's nuanced, it's complicated, and we need to open some books to learn about the bigger picture and how this fits in. No, it has to be a partisan for or against type division. And again, that's divide and conquer. So it prevents you from diving into what actually happened and what is the true information. It just keeps you like flinging mud at the opposing team and getting outraged. This censorialism has had far broader effects in academia. The NAS has concerned itself with violations of institutional neutrality, shoutdowns, firings of dissenting professors, forced removal of published research, and the extension of a diversity, inclusion, and equity bureaucracy tasked with ensuring the suppression of all dissenting speech. I always think it's funny they use the acronym DEI, diversity, inclusion, and equity. In fact, they've done it the right way around here. They've put DEI in brackets, but they've actually typed it out as diversity, inclusion, and equity, which would be DIE, which would be die. I think that's deliberate, and it would be a better acronym to use for all this silly nonsense. Of course, as we learned in the last episode, that inclusion means exclusion, and diversity means homogeneity of thought and opinion and viewpoint. So it is Orwellian double speak. It means the opposite of what they want you to assume it means. And they want you to assume it means something without looking into it or checking it out and reading their books and looking at the effects of it in the real world. But this is happening. All this kind of stuff has made its way into the corporate world. Employers are forcing their staff to go through these kind of trainings, and it is accelerating. Are there historical precedents for this kind of thing to tell us what happens when this kind of thing accelerates? Yes, there are. There are many. So get a history book out. Shoot me a message if you want me to recommend some books for you. But it's happened before, and it didn't end well, and it's happening again. But we can divert it this time, right? In our research on CV-19 public health policy, the article says, we have explored the unsettling desire of public health officials, epidemiologists, and computer scientists to use algorithms and epidemiology as combined methods to change public opinion as a supposed measure of public health to ensure it follows what the government believes to be best policy. Now, on the face of it, you might think that's fine. It's not fine, because what does the government know? What do computer scientists know? And what do epidemiologists know? I mean, epidemiologist sounds good. It's like, oh, good, yeah, we want to listen to what they do. But look into it. Look into what epidemiology actually is, and the methodology of that discipline. I'm not convinced that it's the best way to make any decisions. Really, it's kind of a bit of a slapdash, haphazard, hearsay way of gathering information. So, and the computer scientists, I mean, what do they know really about anything? They're just punching numbers, making a computer model, and then saying everybody's gonna die. We got to do this, this, and this. You'll find, if you look into it, who benefited from that whole effort, who pushed it, and you'll see that there's a very profoundly hard to ignore money trail and money transfer. That's what you need to be looking at, okay? We have noted, moreover, that all critical theory, and critical theory is the idea that truth is arbitrary and made up by each individual person. It's relativism, and that we all get to just decide for ourselves what is moral, what is right, what we do or do not do in life. And it's a bit of basically just a free-for-all. And there is no structure or no value to traditions and cultures or hierarchy of competence or authority. We just throw all that out and we just say, it's just make it up, believe what you want to believe. In my last episode, I talked about young people or not even just young people, like some old people who should know better, who want to identify as cats or other pets. And that's fine according to critical theory, because there's millions of genders and you can be whatever you want to be if you just believe it hard enough and force everyone around you to take part in the self-deception and fantasy. We have noted that critical theory, which aims at power rather than truth, underwrites the attitude that opposing points of view should be suppressed on principle. That's what I talked about in my last episode. It's about power. It's about getting one up over another group, usually the group that disagrees with you. All the scholars and bureaucrats who work on disinformation have decided to treat their domestic opponents as enemies of the state. To work on disinformation is to declare war on your fellow citizens who happen to disagree with you on a matter of public policy. Yeah, so this is all feeding into this kind of domestic terrorism, enemies of the state narrative, being that, our greatest enemies are in the country disagreeing with the government, and they're the people that we need to lock up and censor and shut down. And they've got scholars and bureaucrats on board with this effort. Lastly, for this article, more broadly, however, the issues of disinformation and of the CIC highlight why a growing number of America's policymakers and citizens have ceased to respect our institutions of higher education. This is unsurprising when children are going to university and they're leaving kind of worse than they went in. They leave thinking they're radicalized, they're indoctrinated. We talked about this in episode 1 of HEYS Reviews Lives. 2 weeks ago. They go there and they get indoctrinated with political views and beliefs and opinions. And so no wonder people are losing trust and appreciation for these institutions. America's universities should not be institutions of propaganda and censorship, and to the extent they have become so, they have ceased to be institutions of education. Absolutely true, completely on the money. It's much better these days to go out and learn for yourself, learn how to learn, and then decide and choose what you want to learn. Don't let somebody else plant bullshit into your mind when it's young and impressionable. Take control of that. I spoke to, in fact, the other day I spoke to a 18-year-old in Canada who had decided, he was wondering whether or not to go to university, and he said he thought he would have a gap year. And we had this discussion there about how it's all well and good if you want to be like a dentist or a lawyer, or so if your degree is going to lead you straight into a career path of some kind that you have planned before you go. But if you're just going for the sake of it, you're just going to end up in debt. You're going to end up having lots of probably seedy or gross experiences that you will later regret when you grow up and mature and become an adult. And you're going to realize at some point that taking on responsibility, working hard, building a life for yourself and your loved ones is actually the important thing that nobody's teaching our young people. And in fact, what they're getting taught is you can be whatever you want to be, and you can do whatever you want to do, and there's no consequences, and you can have as much alcohol as you like and all the other substances, and you don't have to commit. You can be any kind of gender, any kind of sexual configuration that you want, and there's no consequences, and there's no chance that you will ever regret it or look back and think, oh, do you know what? I wish I'd got married young and had a family and been a mother or a father and built a home and built a wonderful, stable life. Because the thing that is not taught to people is that one day you're going to be 40-year-old, then 50, and then 60, hopefully, and then 70. And in those times, all the debauchery and all the partying you're not going to look back and be glad you did all that. you got to kind of take my word on that. But back to the show. It's a Spectator article, and this is following on from the previous one about Michael Schellenberger. One of his PICs, partner in crime, is this gentleman here, who is Matt Taibbi. So this is a cautionary tale about Wikipedia censorship and the Twitter files. Submission is not enough. The left also wants your humiliation. So part of the problem with this article is that it keeps going on about the left, and I would say it's kind of irrelevant. It's not a left-right issue here, but let's go on and have a look. So who's Matt Taibbi? He is a journalist. He's an old school journalist, and he recently was he won an award, and the award was a shared prize of $10,000 for excellence in investigative journalism. And what happened? Well, somebody in Wikipedia decided it would be a good idea to censor this journalism award and delete it from his Wikipedia entry. So, and the thing, what did he win the award for? Well, he won the award for his efforts to uncover the incestuous relationship between big tech and censorious federal apparatchiks. So big tech is working hand in glove with the people who donate to newspapers, and it's all kind of closing in very rapidly to homogenize opinion and thought and quash dissent, except they will have you fighting over things that are irrelevant and are not important, and they'll have you unable or scared to speak up over things that are important and are relevant. And this is one of the ways they do it. So this man was pointing out this censorship industrial complex that we talked about in the previous article. He won an award, and then this person, I forget the name of the editor. It says it in here somewhere, but a Wikipedia editor went in and said, "Well, what about this award? You can't even verify that it's a real award, and we shouldn't mention it." And you find out at the end that actually it was reinstated and he was brought back. But the point is that it's all about controlled narratives, ego, pride, and ideology. So these groups have been relegated to the basement. So groups which are tend not to go along with consensus views, which have a willingness to publish materials some might find offensive, and groups that ask inconvenient questions, they tend to be relegated to the basement, because it's not about truth and fact-finding. It's not about making sense. It's not about understanding accurately the world we live in and how it works in order to make better choices and build a good life for yourself and enjoy things like freedom and security and the opportunity to pursue your creative inclinations and to build businesses and better conditions for the people around you in your circles and your community and the people you love. It's not about that. It's all about control narratives, ego, pride, and ideology. And this is why legacy media tend to package together outright lunatics with those who are merely skeptical of the consensus. We see this all the time, but in particular over the last 3 years, people who came out and were questioning, asking very sensible, rational, reasonable questions about lockdowns and about all the other measures that were going on. They got packaged with lunatics and painted as such, even though they were being rational and calm-headed and cool and collected. The article that I read at the end of the last episode gave a really good example of a head teacher who was voicing his concern in a calm and rational way about injections for children. And he had a 20-year career during which he'd never received a complaint. He had that 20-year career cancelled. So cancel culture is alive and well. So Taibbi, since he first reported on the Twitter files, has been mocked, disparaged, slandered, and accused of all sorts of ethical lapses by members of the corporate press. Interestingly, with the Twitter files, they were only released to selected people, right? Rather than just being released to the public. So that was a kind of red flag. The Twitter files were only given to a couple of guys. And they only released like certain screenshots, so it wasn't a full public disclosure. But rightfully so, the Spectator says here, his peers should be envious that he uncovered a conspiracy between the federal government and Twitter. Instead, they've accused him of everything from being a stooge to embellishing the details for personal financial gain. So this guy actually got on a scoop something that all investigative journalists should be looking to do. And instead of being celebrated, and I mean, he was given an award, but he received a massive amount of backlash. How dare you? How dare you point out the censorship industrial complex? How dare you point out a real life conspiracy? Not even a theoretical one, just an actual real one, because the word conspiracy is an actual crime in law, and you can be done for that by the state. By, you know, if you're found guilty of that, you can be put in jail and arrested and punished. It's a real thing. And they're not theoretical. Some of them are theoretical and they're fun to talk about and play with, but there are actual real world ones which are much more important and worth learning about and becoming aware of, because you know, some people don't have your best interests at heart, and they have a lot of power and a lot of influence, and they're working against you. All right, last bit I wanted to mention here. Mentions of the award. So this is the award he won for his journalism. Never should have been scrubbed from the profile in the first place. As one Wikipedia editor, Riley, noted, the initial censorship that clearly intended to undercut the achievement is an example of the exact type of thing Taibbi warned about in his acceptance speech. So he knows firsthand these things. He knows what he's talking about. He is somebody that is very much worth listening to, and it happened to him. So pay attention. Next up, Spiked. The law should keep out of our private conversations. A retired judge has been criminalized for accidentally broadcasting a vile conversation with a friend. So this is kind of funny. There was a retired Scottish sheriff and lawyer who represented the Lockerbie bomber in court in 1993, and he was running an online training course for justices of the peace. During his lunch break, he rang up a friend, forgot to mute himself, and had an extremely vulgar and offensive conversation about pornography. He was asking his friend kind of rude stuff that I don't need to repeat here, but you can read it. I'll just highlight it for you there. One of the things that I laughed, that made me laugh in this, was he asked the question, do you like them with pale skin? And then he also asked the question, do you like them with brown skin? And the article says that this was a racist slur. So, excuse me. We talked about this in the last episode as well. The color brown is, they're removing it from James Bond stories because it's offensive, because there's no brown people in the world. Brown people do not exist. White people exist. Yeah, completely white. The color of nothing. The you know, white is the totality of all colors, right? It's not even a color. And we're not even white, but you can talk about white people, but you can't talk about brown. The color brown is now an offensive racist slur. Silly. But anyway, this guy forgot to switch off his microphone, so the conversation was broadcast to the trainees. And, you know, it would be unpleasant. It's kind of stupid that he did this. It was a very poor moment of judgment on his part. But then he got fined £1,275 for breaching the peace. And he only narrowly escaped being put on the sex offenders register. But he was criminalized, as it says here, for a private conversation. You know, this was just him having a conversation with a friend, and, you know, you should be allowed to do that. And the people who were listening to it, they could have just took their headphones off. They could have muted the speakers on their computer. You know, they were supposed to be on a lunch break, so what were they doing sitting there listening to him anyway? Mute it, come back on at the end of the lunch break, and then just say, hey, your thing was broadcast, you know, or speak up while it's happening. But instead, people are kind of, they want to tell. I'm telling, teacher, I'm telling over you. You hurt my feelings, and you made me feel unsafe. And this is where we're at, you know, criminalized for a private conversation. And Police Scotland ordered hard-pressed officers to spend time and resources on an arrest, a search of 2 houses, and a detailed analysis of electronic equipment. So do you think that's resources well spent? Do you think that is police time well spent? This should worry anyone who cares about free speech, of course. That is correct. And it's because it's becoming the norm in the UK for offensive remarks to be punished by the law. Offensive remarks, again, what is offense? Who decides what is offensive? Well, you do. You can be offended by anything you want and ring the police, and they'll knock on somebody's door and search their house and raid their electronic equipment. slap them with a fine, and possibly stick them on a list or put them in jail because you and your precious feelings were offended by someone else making sounds with their mouth. Hope you didn't find that offensive. Please do not arrest me. All right, blacklisted news. UNESCO seeks to regulate all internet content. So we've got the theme emerging today, which is why I called this Common Censored. But yeah, UNESCO is really at the front here. And this is a new website I hadn't checked out before, but Blacklisted News. This is where stuff that gets censored elsewhere can have a home. And you can come here and look at stuff that, people like Bill Gates and the Rockefeller Foundation and the established mainstream efforts, they don't want you to see these things. So this is a good place to come. I haven't spent too much time on here, but I found this website because I couldn't view this article anywhere else. And so this article was originally from Technocracy News, which is a wonderful website by Patrick Wood. He's got a lot of books out about technocracy. I would encourage people to go and have a look at that. But this article is telling us about UNESCO's 59-page report, which is titled Guidelines for the Governance of Digital Platforms. This article says this is Orwellian doublethink at its worst, promoting free speech. That is anti-free speech. Yes, as always, the opposite of what they say tends to be true. UNESCO will spawn a feeding frenzy of eager NGOs and government tyrants to promote and defend the globalist narrative. Yep, that's what's happening. So, representatives from independent regulators have already welcomed UNESCO's initiative, and several of them in Africa and Latin America have indicated that they are ready to begin implementing these measures. So to this end, UNESCO will organize the first World Conference of Regulators in mid-2024. So they've got 1 million euros already pledged by the European Commission to put into this effort, and they're basing this effort around 7 principles which must be respected. So, and I've highlighted the 3 important ones here. I won't read them all out, but they're on the screen there if you want to check it out. But number 2 is independent public regulators are set up everywhere in the world with clearly defined roles and sufficient resources to carry out their mission. But don't worry, this has nothing to do with world government. This has nothing to do with making sure everybody on the planet is controlled by the same small cadre and group and cabal of people. But they just want to set it up everywhere in the world. But it's nothing to do with world government. Number 4, content moderation is feasible and effective at scale in all regions and in all languages. So you will not be able to go anywhere that isn't regulated and controlled, and you will not be able to even use any language that is not regulated and controlled. So no good trying to, learn an obscure language. I think they're trying to mainly get everyone speaking English, so they can regulate and control it. And then the 7th principle: regulators and platforms take stronger measures during politically sensitive moments like elections and crises. Well, given that crises are manufactured and thrust upon us back to back constantly all the time, that sounds like stronger measures are going to be a permanent thing that once introduced will never be gotten rid of, just like many of the emergency powers that our governments like to grant themselves when these crises and emergencies happen. And we'll just give it to ourselves for 3 months, and 3 decades later they're still using those powers against us. Many examples of that here in the UK and America as well. So the article is telling us that freedom of expression must be protected. So this is the Orwellian double speak. So the UNESCO is saying freedom of expression must be protected by controlling everything globally and regulating everything everywhere and using strong measures during, the crises and the elections. But it's because they want to protect free speech. Yeah. So you've got teams of qualified moderators can carry out reliable and effective control of content that is posted online. Okay, so they want to control the content that's posted online. That's not free speech. And they want to guarantee electoral integrity. All I can say to that is lol. And the global survey, but this is your fault because you wanted it, right? Because the global survey confirms the urgent need for action. The publication of this action plan is accompanied by an opinion poll conducted by Ipsos for UNESCO with over 8,000 respondents across 16 countries where elections will be held next year. it shows that 85% of the citizens are worried about the impact of online disinformation at a time when social media platforms have become the primary source of information for a large majority of them. So just to pause on that a second, at a time when social media platforms have become the primary source of information, that is actually your fault. That is our fault. Social media should not be your primary source of information, right? Books and documentaries should be. People who post the evidence and artifacts for your consideration, people who do not tell you what to think, people who draw your attention to what's going on and say, look at it for yourself, make your own mind up. It is up to you to look for good information. And I'm telling you that good information exists primarily in books, and then secondarily is being put out there by people who read the books, right? So if the person or the pundit or the person that you are particularly into their content and you like to get on board with the things they're telling and they're teaching you, if they're not reading books and giving you the source material and telling you where they're learning, what they're saying, then they're probably no good. And I would move on. And I would find someone else like a Richard Grove or a James Corbett or a Ryan Christian of Last American Vagabond, because they give you all the references and the evidence for you to look at yourself. And I try to do the same thing. But so that part of it is on us, right? But what they're telling us here is that 85% of citizens are worried about online disinformation. 87% of citizens believe misinformation has already had an impact on the political life. 88% are calling on governments and regulators to resolve this problem by regulating social media. I wasn't asked. I wasn't part of this poll. I don't know who was, right? But this is what they do, right? They'll handpick groups that they know are going to want this, and then they'll report it to you like 88% of everybody wants this to happen. So we're doing it for you because you want it. Were you asked? No, you weren't. This is the report itself from UNESCO. You can go and read it, 59 pages. I haven't read the whole thing. But in the very short summary at the beginning, they lay it all out and tell you right up front what it is about. Safeguarding freedom of expression and the right to information while dealing with dis and misinformation, hate speech, and conspiracy theories requires a multi-stakeholder approach. Yeah, so that's what they're going after. They're going mis and disinformation. They're not going after like I said, they're not going after lies. They're not going after deceit. They're not going after made up, unverified information and facts. No, they're just going mis and disinformation, and they get to decide what is mis and disinformation. Namely, it's whatever goes against the narrative being pushed by Rockefeller Foundation, Bill Gates, the globalists, the people who are controlling the media and controlling the acceptable window of what you can and cannot say and can and cannot think by using the censorship industrial complex. So that is who gets to decide what is acceptable or unacceptable. So that's worth having a look at and reading it. I'm pretty sure in here as well, they say somewhere that, yeah, they use the word control. They do use it a lot. You know, there's no denying that. I'm not sure if it is here. But anyway, check that out. 59 pages. Read it for yourself. They tell you what they're doing. They always do. And so when these things happen, you know, if you're not taking the time to be aware, to read and learn and educate yourself, you really have no excuse when these things happen to you. Next story. So this is kind of following on from the same sort of topic, but we got Nikki Haley, I think she's a presidential candidate, or she's a Republican in America. She says she wants everybody's name. She wants to force social media companies to check government-issued IDs for account holders. So she is a presidential hopeful for the Republican Party. She wants to remove online anonymity and recruit all social media account holders to verify their accounts with a government ID. Misinformation is a national security threat. One thing I agree with her on is this bit here. She emphasized her demand for transparency in social media algorithms. That's good. I think we should be able to see what is going on under the hood of these things and why certain voices and outlets are censored and removed and gotten rid of. I think that is I just think that's a good point. But this is the spoonful of sugar, right, for the medicine. So this bit, everyone's, oh yeah, that sounds really good, that's great. Meanwhile, removing online anonymity. Well, what's the problem with that? What's the problem with removing anonymity? Well, the problem with that is In oppressive regimes, anonymity is often a shield for dissidents and activists. It allows them to speak out against government abuses, organize protests, and share information without immediately revealing their identity. Mandatory ID verification would strip away this layer of protection, making it easier for authoritarian governments to identify, track, and prosecute individuals who oppose them. Now, you might think you don't live in an authoritarian or oppressive regime right now, but if the plan was to bring one in the future, wouldn't you want to get rid of anonymity first so that when you brought out your oppressive authoritarian regime, there was no recourse? That's what I would do. If I was a tyrant, I would be like, okay, well, we want to turn the screw on these people, but at the minute they got this anonymity, they can talk to each other online, they can spread ideas, they can criticize us. Let's get rid of that. Let's tell it it's for their benefit and their protection and their safety, like they always do, because they care about us so much. And let's pave the way to roll out our more oppressive, tyrannical version of what we have in mind. So this is really important to bear in mind when you're listening to these pundits. Authoritarian regimes often employ extensive surveillance to monitor and control their citizens. So this is a theme as well over the last few episodes. The extensive surveillance is in place. It's being done. Surveillance Capitalism, Shoshana Zuboff, that's the book to read about that. It's verified. It's backed up. So anonymity allows for the free exchange of ideas without fear of retribution. That is what evil people want to get rid of. They don't want people to freely exchange ideas and information in order to point out the ridiculousness or the absurdity or the cruelty or the horror of what they're doing. Right? They want people confused, siloed, unable to communicate, and they want to enforce a consensus in the minds and the opinions of the masses, and that's how they do it. So that's happening. Then we've got UK government proposals would allow it to mass surveil all users of an internet service within specific time frame. So this is broad-reaching surveillance. So it follows hot off the press of that previous article. And again, another one. This is a UK my government, not my government, but the government of the place in which I live, has presented draft amendments to the Investigatory Powers Act, otherwise known as Snoopers Charter, which gives them the right to carry out mass surveillance of an internet service within a specific time frame, dragnet style, by spying on all users of that service during a given time. So they're saying that public figures are being abused by sustained online threats, and we need to protect them. We need to protect public figures from abuse by allowing investigators to identify subjects accessing internet resources being used at relevant specified times, coincidental to the abuse occurring and threats having been made. So if a public figure is getting abused, and you can see how they're setting this up as well. So one of the examples that springs to mind is J.K. Rowling. She had some opinions about hot fire incendiary topic, and then she was getting doxxed and people showing up at her home and people outright just saying horrible things about her online. She got, I think, she was kind of snubbed by a bunch of the Harry Potter film actors and actresses. She wasn't invited to a party or something or other. And you see how the government coming go, she was actually, we need to protect people like J.K. Rowling because she was really unfairly victimized there. And most people go, yeah, she was actually, because the things she said were not at all offensive or cruel or phobic in any way. And so the government were like, if you just let us push these powers through, then we can protect like people like J.K. Rowling and we can make sure that never happens again because we care about you. The article's saying, it's basically just talking about the update in the law, not taking into account the years of criticism and proposals on how to make it better, but instead they have decided to double down on how awful it is. So yeah, they're tightening the screw. Interestingly, one of the things that came out of the plan being publicly presented by the UK's King last Tuesday was that there was an idea to introduce the power of veto if and when privately owned, mostly US social platforms decided to usher in some privacy-friendly features. So the UK wants to be able to prevent US social platforms from introducing privacy. So this would mean that if globally operating tech and social media companies decide to increase security of their products, benefiting you and I and the people who use them, they would first have to have the UK spying community's blessing. So this is MI5, MI6, secret. The intelligence agencies have to first agree that that is okay before the companies that we pay to provide a service or a product are allowed to do anything that would benefit us and our privacy. So that tells you a lot about the way these things work. This is another quick story about how the Finnish court sides with parliamentarian who was charged with hate speech after tweeting some Bible quotes. So I won't dwell too long on this one, but it was just an interesting story because, she's putting out, pictures from the Bible, different verses, and she was accused of hate speech, and then taken to trial, and this took a lot of time. And the writer of the article is comparing it to a medieval heresy trial. The suggestion was that Räsänen had committed the modern day equivalent of blasphemy against prevailing doctrines, right? So this is just a shape, I would say, a sign of things to come, where publishing a screenshot of a Bible quote can land you getting in trouble. I'd be interested to see if any other holy books would elicit the same response. My guess is that they would not. All right. We're getting towards the end of the show now. How are we doing for time? Cool. So this is an interview with Nick Bostrom about will AI lead to tyranny? And this is pretty funny because it really sums up the kind of mindset of the, I don't want what word to use them, just the people who are running the show, let's say. Because basically what he says in this interview is that there's the progress of artificial intelligence has been rapid, and it's kind of, we're taking us into new territory, and it might destroy us, but we have to keep going because the benefits outweigh the potential downside. Right? So the potential downside being the extinction of the human race, but the benefits of AI mean that it's worth taking that risk. Sane people would be like, let's just not develop it. We're good. We got pen and paper. We got books. We got our video calls. We can talk to anyone on, anywhere in the world. We can do business with anyone anywhere in the world. We have the payments the systems in place. We have the information flow is there. We don't need AI to do anything else. All we need to do now is employ people, give them jobs and let them run things, and we can keep everyone busy and keep building an economy where everyone has what they want. But no, we need AI. and so the possibility of human extinction is what is being talked about as an existential risk. But interestingly, he also says, so he's answering this question about existential risk, and he says, you could imagine some kind of global totalitarian surveillance dystopia that you could never overthrow. And my argument is, my thesis is that is what is being built around us as we sit here and let it happen. He says the wheels are coming off the institutional processes. So remember the other article about how people lost their faith in our universities and education system. Wheels are coming off. And so because of that, we can't rely on the institutions that we had in the past. I would argue that they're being deliberately undermined and brought to their knees. This is not accidental. It's happening on purpose because the plan is to bring in this new system, which is going to be the one he describes right here. I'll turn that green. That is the plan right there in a sentence. And this is how, articles like this and characters like Nick Bostrom, they get interviewed and they plant the seed, and they kind of reveal to you the plan before it happens, so that when it does happen, you're subconsciously, psychologically prepared for it, and you are less likely, therefore, to resist or speak up or say anything about it. So he talks about in the UK, we recently had a global AI summit, and the White House also came out with executive orders, and people are seeing for themselves how fast the technology is improving. But then he uses this thing here where he's talking about AI. He says, once AI has enough neurons in its brain, and I had to highlight that and say, look, it's not intelligence, right? It's code, and it's programmed by humans. To have intelligence in the way human beings have it, you need a brain, you need a nervous system, you need the right adequate, air, and it's a whole mess of, not mess, it's actually a beautiful, incredible design that is, unsurpassed as far as we're aware, of electricity and biochemical interactions, and it's incredibly complex, and that's what allows intelligence to occur. Ones and zeros on a hard drive, it just doesn't compare. It really doesn't. But they want you to think that it's close to being intelligent, that it can think, that it can be self-aware, and all these other things. When actually they're just sort of simulating, the experience of sending text messages to another human. That's what it really is at this point. But the questions are about. You're right about the idea that we have to begin to teach AI a set of values by which it will function. And one of the liberal values that has been called into question when it comes to AI is freedom of speech. There have been examples of AI effectively censoring information or filtering information that is available on a platform. So that's the interviewer. Yeah, exactly. That is, I think, the real goal with this technology, is to have it as an intermediary that automatically changes or censors or removes anything that doesn't go along with that top-down, well-funded, well-established narrative and plan that goes back over 100 years to the time of Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner. That's a topic for another video, though. And Nick Bostrom, what does he say about that? He says, I think AI is likely to greatly increase the ability of centralized powers to keep track of what people are thinking and saying. You can eavesdrop on people's phone calls or social media postings, and it turns out governments do that. Well, of course they do. Why wouldn't they, Nick? With AI technology, you could simultaneously analyze everybody's political opinions on a sophisticated way using sentiment analysis. You could have a kind of mass manipulation, but instead of sending out one campaign message to everybody, you could have customized persuasion messages for each individual. You could combine that with physical surveillance systems like facial recognition, gait recognition, your gait is the way you walk, and credit card information. Ooh, goody. If you imagine all of this information feeding into one giant model, I think you will have a pretty good idea of what each person is up to, what and who they know, but also what they are thinking and intending to do. If you have some sufficiently powerful regime in place, it might then implement these measures and then perhaps make itself immune to overthrow. 1984 was not a warning, it was a business plan. And that is the business plan that is being rolled out. Okay. He talks a little bit about hyper-realistic propaganda, deepfake videos that are coming. And then they talk more about tyrannical. So the theme running through this is tyrannical governments using this technology. And at the very end, like I said at the beginning, we don't want to have a future where the majority of sentient minds or digital minds are horribly oppressed and we are like pigs in Animal Farm, which is another George Orwell book. That would be one way of creating a dystopia. So again, the opposite is true, right? He's telling you that, we don't want that to happen. We have to keep making AI, right? It must go ahead. It must continue. We must keep developing it. We have to keep developing it, even though it might lead to an irresistible, let's say irresistible, not in the good sense, but a irresistible world tyranny. One that you cannot resist, that you cannot overthrow, that you cannot upend, that there's just no recourse against what it's doing. It could lead to that, but it might not. So let's keep going. Yeah, all right, Nick. Thank you, Nick Bostrom. So, but that was just a big revelation of the plan and what this technology is supposed to do and what it will end up doing if people keep using it carelessly and thoughtlessly. So another story here, this is from the NHS, which is the England socialized healthcare system, which is on its knees at the moment in many ways. But don't worry, because artificial intelligence is here to help save the NHS and save us. So this is artificial intelligence to help boost NHS winter response and prevent avoidable admissions. Artificial intelligence will spot patients at risk of needing to go to hospital. So community teams can get to them first and reduce pressures on A&E. So they want to prevent people getting to hospital. They want to use electronic sensors on kettles and fridges, which spot changes in patients' eating and drinking habits. They're going to use that to identify the most at-risk patients and prevent them from going to hospital, and they'll just send people out to their homes instead. So this is at a time when the NHS is underfunded. It is understaffed. Everyone is stretched. I have family members visit a local NHS-run accident and emergency centre recently, and they had long conversations with the nurse there, who says that the people running the place keep introducing new models, new ways of working that nobody can keep up with, and just when they get familiar with it, it changes again. People coming in from all different industries, such as car manufacturing, to run these things, but they're not familiar with healthcare and health systems and hospitals and this kind of stuff. But don't worry, we got AI. And I'm going to tell you a story after this one about why this is actually pretty alarming and what it could be leading to. But the goal of running this AI is to, over the next 2 years, prevent 4,500 unnecessary A&E attendances, prevent 17,000 overnight hospital stays, and free up 23,000 GP appointments, which is pretty ambitious. They want fewer people going to hospital and using those services, which you have to pay for in this country. It gets automatically deducted from your pay each month. So they want to reduce the number of people going in there and send people to their homes to deal with them instead. Why is this scary? And I'm going to have to rush through this last bit because I've just noticed what time it is. Why is this scary? Well, if you look over at Canada, who have a similar sort of healthcare system as we do, what you'll find is, and this is an article from October 26, is that assisted suicide made up 4% of all deaths in Canada in 2022. So I don't know if you knew that they had this program over there, but over in Canada, if you are ready to die, the government will help you do that. So 4.1% of all deaths in the country, this is a 31.2% growth rate compared to the previous year. So it's going up. And since the introduction of the legislation in 2016, there's been nearly 45,000 medically assisted deaths in Canada. So that's 45,000 people have been helped to die by the government. And there's a medical ethicist journal talking about this, that if assisted suicide were listed as an official cause of death, it would be the 5th leading cause of death in Canada. I mean, that's shocking, right? There's a pressing need to prioritize mental health care over expanding eligibility for euthanasia and assisted suicide. It's frightening to think how these numbers will grow if the federal government pushes forward in its plan to expand eligibility for euthanasia and assisted suicide to those whose sole underlying condition is mental illness. Additionally, the report highlighted that palliative care has the potential to reduce the inclination towards medically assisted death, as evidenced by 42% of individuals who initially sought MAID, they're calling it MAID as well, ultimately retracting their request due to improvements in their condition. So there's people getting really down in the dumps to the pits of despair with depression and anxiety, and they're thinking, I just want to end it all. 42% of those who contacted and reached out for this service changed their mind. What if the service was more efficient? What if it was faster? What if they got there sooner? Those 42% of people would not be with us anymore, right? And the reason I put these two articles together is if you look at this one, which aims to identify, the AI system in the NHS aims to identify people who are highly at risk, send teams out to their homes, and if you combine it with this one, oh no, hang on, I just went in the wrong direction. If you combine it with this story about the increase in assisted suicide, you could see where this might lead, right? Where it's identifying people and it's saying, okay, we don't want them to come into hospital. They're really sick. They really need medical support. Maybe we would just go around and we just say, look, it's a big drain on the taxpayer. It's a big burden on the people working in A&E. You don't want to come in there and clog up the system. There's people who actually need it. Maybe it would just be better if we could help you in another way to end this whole thing so that there's no need for to be stretching already thin services, right? So that is a cheery topic that I wanted to leave you with. Something to think about, food for thought, but you can probably, hopefully, get a good sense of the picture that I'm trying to paint here. And this is not the picture that I'm trying to paint. I shouldn't say that. It's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to connect some dots so that you can see the picture that you're living in. The picture exists. I didn't paint it. Somebody else painted it. I'm just trying to point it out and show it to you. All right, lastly, what have we got? The very final thing here. So the last thing I wanted to leave you with is a resource, circling back to the first article we talked about, which is massive funding of The Guardian, massive funding of newspapers by this gentleman here, William Gates, or Bill Gates, as he's more commonly known. This is an incredible resource on the Corbett Report website. It's a 2-hour documentary, and it tells you all about who is this gentleman and why he's doing what he's doing. So the first part is only 23 minutes long. So if you don't think you can invest 2 hours in educating yourself about who is creating the world that you and your, future generations of humans are going to be living in, if you don't have 2 hours to invest in that, just 23 minutes. And you can even go down here and you could put the speed onto 1.5 and get through it in 15 minutes instead. But part one is about how Bill Gates has monopolized global health. So the global health, the way health is, and again, it's opposite because it's symptom management. It's not healing people or curing people. It's not promoting health. People are not getting healthier en masse. Where his systems are rolled out, it tells you about how he built this monopoly. And a little quote. Did I highlight a quote? Oh, I did not. But underneath, even if you can't watch the video for any reason, you could just read the script there, and it gives you all the clips and the sources. And it's a really wonderful resource, which I'm going to link. You saw there who we got in this video, in this documentary. We got Klaus Schwab. We got I'm just pretty sure, we got Rockefeller as well. There you go. So Rockefeller's in there, lots of numbers and facts, and Corbett Report does incredible work. It's usually unassailable, well referenced with the evidence and the articles and the sources linked below for your viewing consideration, so that you don't have to believe anything that is said here. You can go and make your own mind up. That is the end of today's show. That is, we did it a little bit shorter than last week, but still, I want to tighten it up and hopefully get these down to an hour so that I'm not taking a massive amount of time for everybody. But thank you for checking this out. If you stuck it out till the end, sincere thank you, because I know your time is precious and valuable, and your attention is the most important resource that you have in this experience called life. So if you enjoyed what I'm doing, then you can have a look in the box below the video. There's some affiliate links to courses, which I think are incredibly valuable. There's also a link to my Instagram page and a buy me a coffee link as well if you fancy buying me a coffee. I won't spend that money on coffee. I'll probably spend it on books. But they are books that will become content in the future that you get to enjoy and learn from. So much appreciated. But if you can't do any of that, that's fine. A like and a share and a subscribe, it would be just phenomenally fantastic as well. So thank you very much for hanging out with me for this episode 3 of HEYS Reviews Lives. This has been Censored, and it's been really good to have you here with me to spend this time, to do some learning, to connect some dots, and I hope the rest of your day is wonderful, and I'll see you